The first transition is the collapse of the illusion that someone will come to save you. There are seasons in life when you are not exactly failing, but you cannot say you are moving forward either. You are still trying, still holding everything together. Yet deep inside, there is a feeling hard to name, as if you are quietly waiting, not for a clear plan, but for a moment when everything will somehow become easier. Someone will appear, an opportunity will open, something outside will shift the direction of your life. That expectation doesn't come from conscious thought. It comes from a deeper place, formed in the moments you were once rescued when things felt overwhelming. Slowly, an invisible structure takes shape. When the difficulty grows great enough, something or someone will arrive. So you hold back a portion of your energy, keeping it in reserve, waiting, instead of fully stepping into your life. But life does not always repeat itself the way you remember it. There are seasons where no intervention comes at all. No one appears, no sign arrives. And in that emptiness, what truly collapses is not your life. It is the belief that an external force will show up at the right moment. As Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." I once met a designer named Ethan, who stayed 4 years at a job he didn't enjoy. Whenever asked, he'd say, "I'll wait a little longer. Maybe my boss will finally recognize me." He worked harder, took on more, and nothing changed. When the company restructured and the role he hoped for went to someone new, he finally faced it. He had stood still for years, not because circumstances held him back, but because he had placed his hope in something that was never guaranteed. Like a boat anchored in the middle of the sea, waiting for a current to carry it to shore. But the ocean has no obligation to take you anywhere. Only when you lift the anchor and steer does the boat begin to move. When you stop waiting for rescue, you don't just lose an illusion, you reclaim your entire capacity to move. The second transition is the feeling of isolation as a gateway into the unconscious. When you stop waiting for external help, your attention no longer has anything to attach to in the outside world, and it begins to turn inward. You don't suddenly become stronger or clearer. Instead, you enter a strange state where everything feels slower, emptier, harder to understand. The familiar signals that once guided your reactions begin to fade, and you start to notice that much of your mind was filled with things that never truly came from within you. As those layers withdraw, a space opens, not just emptiness, but a territory you have never truly observed. And within that space, something begins to surface, not as clear answers, but as fragmented memories, recurring images, familiar emotions with no obvious origin. Things you thought you had forgotten return, patterns in how you see the world that you had never noticed. And none of this is new. It was always there. You simply never had enough stillness to see it. Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." He was pointing to the courage required to face what has always lived beneath the surface. There is the old myth of Orpheus, who descended into the underworld. He did not fight and did not run. He went deeper into a place where light no longer existed, and there he was forced to face the deepest parts of himself. Isolation works the same way. It is not a punishment, but a gate, like entering a dark room that was always lit before. When the light goes out, the room doesn't become more chaotic. It is simply the first time you truly see what was always there. That is why this feeling of being alone is a sign you are approaching a deeper layer of yourself. And only when you are quiet enough to stay in that space can you begin to see what was hidden. If you are in this stage, leave a single word in the comments. Depth. Not for others to understand you, but to mark that you have begun to touch a deeper layer within yourself. You may have felt this already, or you may be living it right now. On the surface, everything still looks normal. You keep working, you keep going. But somewhere deep inside, there is a very quiet realization. There is no one truly there to hold you anymore. No reassurance, no clear signal that everything will be okay. And in that silence, a question begins to rise, not loudly, but inevitably. When no one is by your side, how will you continue? Most of us were never taught how to stand alone. We grew up being reflected, guided, validated by others. But Carl Jung saw this differently. He believed that the very periods when no one is there are exactly where the deepest transformation begins. Not on the outside, but within the structure of who you are. In this video, we will move through 7 inner transitions, what truly happens when you no longer have anyone to lean on, and why that difficult state can become the starting point for a kind of growth that no external condition could ever give you. So if you are in that phase right now, perhaps this is not the moment you are falling behind. Perhaps it is the moment you begin moving in a direction that very few people ever dare to enter. The third transition is acting without external recognition. Once you start to see what lies beneath the surface, another question quietly appears. If no one is watching you, will you still keep moving forward? There is a truth most people never face until they are truly alone. Much of what you used to do was tied to being seen, not necessarily a crowd. Sometimes, just a few eyes, a small acknowledgement, a response that reassured you that you were on the right path. But when all of that disappears, the things that once motivated you begin to feel faint, not because they lost value, but because the link between action and feedback has been cut. A viewer named Linda, a writer, once shared her story. She started young, posting online, gaining attention, likes, comments, praise. Over time, that attention faded. She kept posting, but no one responded as before. For a while, she almost stopped. Then, she said something simple. I had gotten used to writing to be seen, but I had never truly written just to write. After a long silence, she returned. But this time, she didn't post anywhere. She wrote in the morning, wrote in the evening, without sharing, without waiting for feedback. Months later, she said, "For the first time, I know what it feels like to write without needing anyone to read." The change wasn't in her skill. It was in her relationship with the act itself. There's even a mechanism behind this. When you act and receive positive feedback, the brain ties that action to reward. When the reward vanishes, the motivation weakens. But when you keep going without any reward, the brain builds a different kind of reinforcement, one that comes from the process itself. As Jung put it, the creation of something new is not accomplished by the intellect, but by the play instinct acting from inner necessity. Every time you do something without being witnessed, you cut another thread binding you to the outside world. Slowly, you stop living in reaction to how others perceive you, and you begin to live from a more stable inner axis. That stability becomes the real foundation for anything lasting. The fourth transition is breaking the belief that your value depends on others. When you can keep acting without recognition, something deeper surfaces. You realize your sense of value has never truly stood on its own. It has always been shaped by how others reflect you. For most of your life, you didn't experience your worth as something inherent. You saw it through the eyes, reactions, and attitudes of those around you. When others appreciated you, you felt valuable. When that feedback changed, your sense of self moved with it. And it happened so quietly you rarely questioned it. Jung called this structure the persona, a psychological mask that helps you adapt to the world. It's necessary. Without it, you couldn't function in society. The problem is not that the mask exists. The problem is that you unconsciously believe you are the mask, that you are only the image others see. I once heard the story of Adam, who was always seen as the emotional support in his relationship. He listened. He kept things stable. Over time, that role became the only way he felt valuable. Then one day, the other person left. No big conflict, no clear reason. What pushed him into crisis was not the end of the relationship, but the loss of being seen the way he once was. He said, "I'm still me, but I no longer know who I am when no one needs me." Like a mirror suddenly taken away, he could no longer see his reflection. Not because he had vanished, but because he had only ever known himself through reflection. As Jung wrote, "The persona is a complicated system of relations between individual consciousness and society. When that intermediary layer stops working, you enter an undefined state where the old standards no longer explain who you are. It feels like being lost, but it is really a transition. You are no longer the old version your environment confirmed, and you have not yet formed a new inner anchor. But if you can stay there without rushing to find a new image to cling to, you begin to realize something essential. Value does not need to be confirmed in order to exist. If this touches something in you, press like on this video as a quiet acknowledgement that you are detaching from what once defined you and moving toward an anchor that no longer depends on anyone else. The fifth transition is the withdrawal of energy from the external world, what Jung called libido withdrawal. When you no longer need a mirror to know who you are, the energy that once flowed outward stops finding anything to attach to, and it slowly turns back inward. For a long time, most of your psychological energy was tied to specific things, people, goals, expectations, visions you believed would bring meaning. But when those anchor points lose their central role, that energy doesn't disappear. It loses its direction, creating a space that's very hard to describe. Most people misread this as a loss of motivation. In reality, it is the way your inner energy operates beginning to change. Jung described libido not just as a biological drive, but as the whole of human psychological energy. Energy that can attach to the outside world or return inward. When you stop investing it outward, it begins to gather within you. And because you were used to feeling energy through outward action, this shift is hard to recognize at first. You can see this clearly in the journey of J.K. Rowling. Before she became one of the most famous authors in the world, she went through a period almost completely detached from every external system that once gave her stability. No prominent position, no recognition, nothing confirming her value. During that time, her energy was no longer attached to anything that could give her feedback. Instead of scattering, it withdrew and concentrated into a deeply personal inner world, where stories began to form with no guarantee they would ever be seen. It was precisely that accumulation, free from external validation, that became the foundation for Harry Potter. Like a river blocked at its outlet, the water does not disappear. It rises behind the dam, building a reservoir. From the outside, everything looks still. But inside, pressure is building, and that pressure will eventually find a new path that never existed before. As Jung wrote, psychic energy is not a static quantity, but a dynamic process. When it is no longer attached to familiar objects, it doesn't stop. It changes how it exists. So if you feel no pull forward, yet can't see where you're going, you are standing in an in-between state. Only when you don't rush to fill that space do you realize the energy was never lost. It is simply waiting for a new structure to express itself. The sixth transition is learning to regulate your emotions instead of seeking someone to contain them. When your energy no longer flows outward, a more direct challenge appears. You can no longer rely on others to soothe what's happening inside you. Many people only realize this when they are truly alone. Emotions do not disappear just because you don't express them, and they don't soften just because you try to ignore them. In the past, when something became overwhelming, you could turn to someone, be heard, and feel lighter. But when no one is there anymore, that option is gone, and you are forced to stay with your emotions, not as something to fix immediately, but as an experience unfolding within you. In the Bible, there is the image of Jesus in the desert. For 40 days he was alone, with no one to share the trial. What appeared were not external circumstances, but inner temptations and impulses he had to face directly, without escape. What is remarkable is not that he defeated them, but that he stayed with them, recognizing them without being carried away. The same thing happens within you. When no one is there to hold your emotions, you start to notice that an emotion does not actually force you to react. In the past, sadness demanded expression, discomfort demanded release, anxiety demanded something to soothe it. But when that familiar pathway is gone, a pause appears. The emotion is still there, but it no longer pulls you into instant reaction. As Jung wrote, what you resist not only persists, but will grow in size. The more you try to push an emotion away, the more it remains in different forms. But when you stop trying to escape and simply stay with it, something shifts. The emotion stops being a signal demanding action and becomes something you can observe, like standing by the edge of a strong river. If you jump in, the current sweeps you away. But if you stand still and watch, you see each wave pass without being pulled along. In the beginning, this feels heavier, more intense than you're used to. But that clarity matters because for the first time, you no longer depend on anyone else to regulate your inner state. If you have walked through moments like this, share your story in the comments. Sometimes, speaking is not about being fixed. It's about realizing you are not the only one walking this path. The seventh transition is the formation of an identity independent of the environment. When you can stay with what's happening inside you without leaning on anything external, a quiet integration begins. Everything that once defined you slowly falls away, revealing a way of being that no longer depends on your surroundings. Few people realize this until they go deep enough. True identity is not something you build, but something that gradually reveals itself when what is not you stops dominating. Before, you knew yourself through roles, through how others responded, through your position in a system. When those systems stop working as before, you enter a strange state where you no longer have a clear definition to hold on to. Yet you are no longer forced to become anything. I once knew a man named John, an influential figure in education, someone who inspired others. For years, that identity was almost inseparable from who he was. But after a period of stepping away, no teaching, no appearances, no environment to sustain the role, he entered a very different silence. No one called him by familiar titles. He said, "I no longer know who I am when I am not standing in front of others." Yet within that silence, something unfolded. He didn't find a new definition. He gradually stopped needing any definition at all. He still read, still reflected, still existed in his own way, but no longer asked whether those things defined him. And strangely, when he stopped trying to become someone, he felt clearer than ever, not as an image, but as a presence. As Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." He didn't mean becoming an ideal version of yourself. He meant removing layer after layer that once covered your true nature. There is even research showing that the sense of who I am is the brain-weaving memory, social feedback, and rolls into a single story. When that feedback fades, the old story loses the data to maintain itself, and a different kind of awareness emerges, no longer based on narrative, but on direct experience of the present. From the outside, this can look like uncertainty. From the inside, it brings a rare clarity, not from knowing who you are, but from no longer needing to ask. When you can stand without a role, without reflection, without definition, you are not just moving forward, you are existing in a way you have never experienced before. When you look back on this entire journey, you may realize something very different from what you once believed. Moving forward is not always about going faster, achieving more, or becoming more visible in the eyes of others. Sometimes it is a quiet process of gradually detaching from what once kept you in place. The expectations, the reflections, the anchors that seemed necessary, but in truth only made you dependent. A person can go very far without anyone noticing, not because they are hiding, but because they no longer need to be seen in order to continue. They don't build themselves on attention, and they don't measure their worth by the world's response. Instead, they move from a foundation that no one can give them and no one can take away. If this video resonated with you, share it with someone who is also quietly walking their own path. And subscribe to keep exploring depths you may have never reached before. Because this journey is not about becoming someone else. It is about no longer needing to become anyone other than yourself.